in the deadly waters of the North Atlantic, a terrifying chase was about to unfold that would change naval warfare forever. The date was May 18, 1941, and the most feared battleship in the German fleet was preparing to unleash devastation upon Britain's lifelines. What happened next would become one of the most dramatic naval hunts in history, but the dark truth behind this epic battle reveals secrets that would haunt both sides for generations to come. The German battleship Bismarck was a floating fortress of unprecedented power. With her massive 15-inch guns and 320mm thick armor plating, she represented the pinnacle of naval engineering. Yet beneath this seemingly invincible exterior lay a deadly flaw that would ultimately seal her fate. At 41,800 tons, fully loaded, the Bismarck was the largest battleship ever built by the German Navy, stretching 251 meters in length. Her 8 15-inch guns could hurl shells weighing over 800 kilograms at targets more than 35 kilometers away. But you'll discover why this mighty vessel's greatest strength would become her most terrifying weakness. The stage was set for Operation Rheinübung, a mission that would either break Britain's Atlantic supply lines or destroy Germany's naval ambitions forever. Admiral Gunther Lütjens, commanding the German task force, understood the deadly stakes. Britain's Atlantic convoys were the nation's lifeline, carrying essential supplies from North America. If these convoys could be severed, Britain would face starvation and defeat. The German U-boat campaign had already sunk millions of tons of Allied shipping, but the addition of the Bismarck's firepower threatened to tip the balance toward catastrophe. However, Lütjens harbored deep concerns about the operation. He had warned Grand Admiral Erich Raeder that sending only 2 ships into the Atlantic was fraught with danger. Originally, the operation was planned to include the battleships Scharnhorst and Gneisenau, creating a formidable battle group, but both ships were undergoing repairs after sustaining damage from Royal Air Force bombing attacks at the French port of Brest. This left only the Bismarck and the heavy cruiser Prinz Eugen to face the might of the Royal Navy alone. The German task force departed from Gotenhofen on the Baltic coast on May 18, 1941. From the beginning, the mission was shrouded in secrecy and tension. The ships initially sailed north towards Norwegian waters, where they would refuel before attempting their breakout into the Atlantic. But a critical error in planning would soon manifest itself with deadly consequences. The naval staff had failed to arrange proper fuel replenishment in Norwegian waters, leaving the Bismarck with insufficient fuel reserves for extended operations. As the German ships moved through the Kattegat and into the North Sea, British intelligence networks began picking up fragments of information. The Swedish cruiser Gotland spotted the German vessels and reported their position, though the full significance of this sighting would not be immediately apparent. Meanwhile, British codebreakers at Bletchley Park were intercepting German naval communications, providing crucial intelligence about enemy movements. On May 21st, a British reconnaissance Spitfire photographed the German ships anchored in Grimstad Fjord, Norway. The images revealed the unmistakable silhouette of the Bismarck alongside the sleek profile of the Prinz Eugen. When a follow-up reconnaissance flight the next day found the fjord empty, Admiral Sir John Tovey, commanding the British Home Fleet, knew that the breakout attempt had begun. The greatest naval hunt of World War II was about to commence. Tovey faced a complex strategic challenge. The German ships could attempt to break into the Atlantic through several possible routes. They might round the northern tip of Iceland, pass through the Denmark Strait between Iceland and Greenland, or even attempt a southern route through the English Channel. With limited resources, Tovey had to make critical decisions about where to position his forces. He correctly anticipated that the Germans would attempt the Denmark Strait passage and accordingly positioned his most powerful ships to intercept them. The battlecruiser HMS Hood, once considered the most powerful warship in the world, was dispatched along with the new battleship HMS Prince of Wales to guard the Denmark Strait. The Hood had been the pride of the Royal Navy for over 20 years. her imposing silhouette and massive guns symbolizing British naval supremacy. With a length of 262 meters and a displacement of 48,000 tons, she was a formidable opponent. Yet the Hood carried a dark secret that would prove fatal in the coming battle. The heavy cruisers HMS Suffolk and HMS Norfolk were already patrolling the Denmark Strait when they spotted the German ships on May 23rd. The Suffolk's radar operator picked up the distinctive signatures of two large vessels moving south through the strait. Despite the risk of engagement with superior forces, the British cruisers began shadowing the German task force, transmitting regular position reports to Admiral Tovey's flagship. The tension aboard both German ships was palpable. Admiral Lütjens knew that once they were spotted, the entire Royal Navy would mobilize to hunt them down. Captain Ernst Lindemann of the Bismarck urged his superior to engage the British cruisers immediately, but Lütjens ordered the ships to maintain course and speed. The German commander hoped to avoid unnecessary combat that might damage his ships or reveal their full capabilities before reaching the Atlantic shipping lanes. As dawn broke on May 24, 1941, the most devastating naval encounter of the early war years was about to unfold. The Hood and Prince of Wales, accompanied by 6 destroyers, were closing rapidly on the German position. At 0535 hours, lookouts aboard the Prince of Wales spotted smoke on the horizon. The range was approximately 17 nautical miles, and both British ships began altering course to close the distance. What happened next would send shockwaves throughout the British Empire and change the course of naval warfare forever. The Hood, leading the British formation, was particularly vulnerable to plunging fire that could penetrate her weakly armored deck. This design flaw had been identified years earlier, but peacetime budget constraints had prevented the necessary modifications. Now, in the cold waters of the Denmark Strait, this deadly weakness would be exposed with catastrophic consequences. At 0552 hours, the Hood opened fire at a range of approximately 25,000 yards. Her massive 15-inch guns roared their defiance across the Arctic waters, but the extreme range and rough seas made accurate shooting extremely difficult. The Prince of Wales, still working up with civilian contractors aboard, joined the engagement moments later. However, the British ships were initially confused about which German vessel was which, causing some shells to be wasted on the wrong targets. The German response was swift and devastatingly accurate. The Bismarck's advanced optical range-finding equipment and superior training began to tell. Her first salvo fell close to the Hood, and by the third salvo, the German gunners had found their range. The Prinz Eugen, initially mistaken for the Bismarck by British gunners, scored the first hit with her fourth salvo. A 20.3-centimeter shell struck the Hood's boat deck, igniting ready-use ammunition and creating a fierce fire that quickly spread. Captain Lindemann, commanding the Bismarck, made a crucial decision that would alter the battle's outcome. Despite Admiral Lütjens's orders to avoid unnecessary engagement, Lindemann ordered his ship to open fire at 0555 hours, declaring that he would not allow his ship to be shot from under him. This act of insubordination would prove tactically brilliant, strategically questionable. The British ships attempted to close the range to bring their after turrets into action, but this maneuver placed them in even greater danger. At 0600 hours, Admiral Lancelot Holland, aboard the Hood, ordered a turn to port that would have allowed both British ships to bring their full firepower to bear. However, this turn would never be completed. At 0601 hours, disaster struck with terrifying suddenness. A 15-inch shell from the Bismarck's fifth salvo plunged through the Hood's weakly armored deck and penetrated deep into the ship's vitals. The shell detonated in or near the after magazine, containing approximately 100 tons of high explosive. The resulting explosion was so violent that it literally tore the mighty battlecruiser apart. A massive fireball erupted from the Hood's stern, and within moments, the ship broke in half. The destruction was so complete and sudden that witnesses could hardly believe what they had seen. The hood's bow section reared up almost vertically, silhouetted against the flames and smoke, before sliding beneath the waves. The entire process took less than 3 minutes. Of the hood's crew of 1,419 men, only 3 survived the catastrophe. Among the dead was Admiral Holland, whose body was never recovered. The psychological impact of the hood's destruction cannot be overstated. She had been more than just a warship. She was a symbol of British naval invincibility. News of her loss sent shockwaves throughout the British Empire and dealt a crushing blow to morale. Winston Churchill, upon hearing the news, immediately issued his famous order, "Sink the Bismarck." The hunt was no longer just a military necessity. It had become a matter of national honor and revenge. The Prince of Wales, still under fire from both German ships, found herself alone and outgunned. The new battleship had suffered several hits and was experiencing mechanical problems with her main armament. Captain John Leach made the difficult decision to withdraw under cover of a smokescreen, but not before scoring several hits on the Bismarck. One shell from the Prince of Wales struck the German battleship forward, causing flooding and contaminating fuel tanks. This seemingly minor damage would prove crucial in the coming chase. The hit from the Prince of Wales had caused the Bismarck to lose access to approximately 1,000 tons of fuel oil stored in forward tanks. Combined with the fuel consumption from high-speed operations, this damage significantly reduced the ship's operational range. Admiral Lutyens made the fateful decision to detach the Prince Eugen to continue the mission alone while the Bismarck headed for the French port of Brest for repairs. The separation of the German ships occurred during the evening of May 24th, but the British shadowing cruisers lost contact with the Bismarck shortly after midnight on May 25th. For nearly 18 hours, the German battleship vanished into the vast expanse of the North Atlantic, causing frantic searches by British forces. However, Admiral Lutyens made a critical error by transmitting a lengthy radio message to German naval headquarters, believing he was no longer being pursued. British radio direction-finding stations intercepted this transmission, providing a rough fix on the Bismarck's position. The British response to the Hood's destruction was unprecedented in its scale and intensity. Admiral Tovey ordered every available ship to join the hunt, leaving convoys and other vital operations virtually unprotected. The battleships King George V and Rodney, the battlecruiser Renown, the aircraft carrier Ark Royal, and numerous cruisers and destroyers converged on the anticipated German position. Force H, commanded by Admiral James Somerville, steamed north from Gibraltar at maximum speed to intercept the German battleship. The breakthrough came on the morning of May 26, when a Catalina flying boat from Royal Air Force Squadron 209 spotted the Bismarck approximately 700 miles west of Brest. The German ship was steering a southeasterly course at reduced speed, clearly making for the French coast. British forces were closing in from multiple directions, but time was running out. The Bismarck was approaching the range of German air cover from French bases, and U-boats were converging on her position to provide protection. The key to stopping the Bismarck lay with the Swordfish torpedo bombers of the Fleet Air Arm. These obsolete-looking biplanes, nicknamed string bags, were slow and vulnerable, but their torpedoes could potentially inflict the critical damage needed to stop the German battleship. The first attack came from HMS Victorious on May 24th, but achieved only one hit that caused minimal damage. The second attack would prove decisive. At 1910 hours on May 26th, 15 Swordfish aircraft from HMS Ark Royal took off in atrocious weather conditions. The pilots faced mountainous seas, driving rain, and the gathering darkness of the North Atlantic. Leading the attack was Lieutenant Commander Tim Coode, whose skilled navigation brought the aircraft within striking distance of their target. The Bismarck's anti-aircraft guns put up a furious barrage, but the slow-flying biplanes proved surprisingly difficult to hit. The attack achieved 3 torpedo hits on the Bismarck, but 2 struck the heavily armored belt and caused little damage. The third torpedo, however, struck the ship's stern and jammed the rudders in a hard-to-port position. This seemingly minor hit would prove catastrophic. The Bismarck began steaming in wide circles, unable to maintain course toward the safety of Brest. Her maximum speed was reduced to 7 knots, and she was now helpless against the converging British forces. Captain Lindemann and his damage control teams worked frantically to regain steering control. Divers were sent down to attempt manual repairs to the rudder mechanism, but the rough seas and battle damage made their efforts futile. The Bismarck's sophisticated design had a fatal flaw. Her advanced rudder system had no manual backup, and once jammed, it could not be repaired at sea. The ship that had seemed invincible was now doomed by a single, well-placed torpedo. Throughout the night of May 26th to 27th, British destroyers harassed the crippled German battleship. The destroyers HMS Cossack, Maori, Sikh, and Zulu, along with the Polish destroyer Piorin, attacked in waves, firing torpedoes and shells at the Bismarck. The German ship's guns responded with deadly accuracy, but the destroyer's speed and maneuverability allowed them to avoid serious damage. The constant attacks prevented the German crew from attempting further repairs and gradually wore down their morale. Admiral Lutyens, recognizing the hopelessness of his situation, transmitted a final message to German naval headquarters: "Ship unmaneuverable. We shall fight to the last shell. Long live the Führer." The message was intercepted by British intelligence, confirming that the Bismarck was indeed helpless. German U-boats were racing to the scene, but they would arrive too late to affect the outcome. As dawn broke on May 27, 1941, the final act of the drama began to unfold. The British battleships King George V and Rodney, accompanied by the heavy cruisers Norfolk and Dorsetshire, closed in on their crippled prey. The Bismarck, though unable to maneuver, remained a formidable opponent with her main armament intact. Her crew, exhausted from the night-long bombardment, prepared for their final battle. At 0847 hours, the Rodney opened fire at a range of approximately 25,000 yards. The King George V joined the action shortly afterward, and the one-sided battle began. The Bismarck's return fire was initially accurate, with several salvos falling close to the British ships. However, the German battleship's inability to maneuver made her an easy target, and the British gunners quickly found their range. The bombardment that followed was devastating in its intensity. The Bismarck's superstructure was systematically destroyed. Her gun turrets were knocked out one by one, and fires raged throughout the ship. By 0931 hours, all 4 main gun turrets were out of action, and the ship could no longer return effective fire. The Rodney closed to point-blank range, firing her guns at distances as short as 3,000 yards. Despite the overwhelming firepower directed against her, the Bismarck refused to sink. Her advanced armor protection and compartmentalized design kept her afloat, even as she was pounded into a burning wreck. The British ships expended hundreds of shells, but the German battleship's hull remained intact. This remarkable survivability demonstrated the excellence of German naval engineering, even as it prolonged the agony of her crew. First Officer Hans Oels, the senior surviving German officer, made the decision to scuttle the ship rather than allow her to be captured. He ordered the crew to abandon ship and set demolition charges throughout the vessel. Moving through the burning wreckage, Oels repeated these orders to all he encountered until a shell from the King George V struck the ship's canteen, killing him and approximately 100 other men. Chief Engineering Officer Gerhard Unach took over the scuttling operation, ordering his men to set charges with 9-minute fuses. The ship's internal communication system had been destroyed, making coordination difficult, but the German crew worked with desperate efficiency to ensure their ship would not fall into enemy hands. The demolition charges were detonated at approximately 10:15 hours, causing massive internal explosions that sealed the Bismarck's fate. The heavy cruiser. Dorsetshire was ordered to finish off the German battleship with torpedoes. At 10:36 hours, she fired 2 torpedoes into the Bismarck's starboard side, followed by a third from the port side. The massive ship finally began to capsize, rolling over to port before disappearing beneath the waves at 10:39 hours. The swastika ensign was still flying from her mainmast as she sank, a testament to the crew's courage in the face of overwhelming odds. The rescue of survivors was hastily organized, but a false U-boat alarm caused the British ships to withdraw after saving only 110 men from the freezing waters. Hundreds of other German sailors were left to drown in the North Atlantic, their cries for help echoing across the empty ocean. The German weather ship Sachsenwald and U-boat U-74 later rescued 5 additional survivors, bringing the total number saved to 115 men from a crew of over 2,000. The sinking of the Bismarck marked a turning point in naval warfare and German strategy. The loss of their most powerful battleship, combined with the earlier destruction of the Hood, demonstrated the deadly vulnerability of even the most advanced warships to air attack. The damage inflicted by a single torpedo from an obsolete biplane highlighted the growing importance of naval aviation and the declining relevance of the bag-gun battleship. Rheinübung. The strategic implications of the Bismarck's destruction were profound and immediate. Adolf Hitler, shocked by the loss of his showcase battleship, forbade any further sorties by major German surface vessels into the Atlantic. The remaining German battleships and cruisers were relegated to secondary roles, primarily serving as training vessels or coastal defense units. This decision effectively ended the German surface fleet's contribution to the Battle of the Atlantic, leaving the U-boat armed to carry the burden of the campaign against Allied shipping. The human cost of the operation was staggering. The Hood's destruction had claimed over 1,400 lives, while the Bismarck's sinking resulted in the loss of more than 1,800 German sailors. The Prince of Wales, though damaged, survived the encounter, only to be sunk by Japanese aircraft 6 months later off the coast of Malaya. The brief but intense campaign had demonstrated the terrible price of naval warfare in the modern age. The technical lessons learned from the Bismarck operation influenced warship design for decades to come. The vulnerability of lightly armored deck plating to plunging fire was dramatically illustrated by the Hood's destruction, leading to improved armor schemes in future battleship designs. The importance of redundant steering systems was emphasized by the Bismarck's helplessness after her rudder damage, resulting in improved damage control systems in subsequent vessels. The role of intelligence in modern naval warfare was also highlighted by the operation. British code-breaking efforts at Bletchley Park had provided crucial information about German intentions, while radio direction finding had helped locate the Bismarck when she attempted to evade pursuit. The integration of intelligence gathering with operational planning became a standard feature of naval operations for the remainder of the war. The Bismarck's final voyage remains one of the most studied naval operations in history. Her crew's courage in the face of overwhelming odds, combined with the tactical brilliance of both sides, created a narrative that transcended the immediate military significance of the events. The operation demonstrated that even the most advanced technology could be defeated by determined opposition and superior numbers. The legacy of the Bismarck operation extended far beyond the immediate tactical results. The psychological impact on both sides was enormous, with the Germans losing confidence in their surface fleet, while the British gained renewed respect for German naval capabilities. The operation also demonstrated the importance of air power in naval warfare, presaging the carrier-dominated battles of the Pacific theater. The story of the Bismarck's hunt and destruction serves as a powerful reminder of the human cost of war and the technological realities of modern naval combat. The brave sailors on both sides who fought and died in the cold waters of the North Atlantic exemplified the highest traditions of naval service, even as they participated in one of history's most devastating maritime conflicts. Their sacrifice helped shape the outcome of World War II and influenced naval warfare for generations to come. The sinking of the Bismarck marked the end of an era in naval warfare. Never again would battleships operate as independent raiders in the Atlantic, and the age of the aircraft carrier was about to dawn. The lessons learned from this epic chase would influence naval strategy and ship design for decades, ensuring that the memory of those who fought and died in the North Atlantic would live on in the evolution of maritime warfare itself.